I use like the boxing analogy. Everybody thinks when a boxer has a one loss on their record, they're done. That's their career over because they've lost that zero. They're not undefeated anymore. They're not perfect. And that's somehow like in our brains that a bad decision means that we haven't lived a perfect life, and that's a bad thing. People are going to shame us. And like you said, a lot of jobs, you're completely right. It only really takes 2 years before you're better than most people. And in those 2 years, you might only do three or four things right before you start to get everything right. But do you think then, if we altered that perspective of perfectionism, this might help us deal with these emotions a little bit better? Because that does seem to be where it's stemming from too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to make a mistake and we all want to be perfect, but as you know, none of us are. And so, yeah, there's a thing called growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So in a fixed mindset, you say, I should know how to do this from the beginning. And you're like, no, you have to have a growth mindset where you go, there's gonna be some down to this learning. Like there's gonna be some mistakes. There's gonna be things that didn't go well, but I'm gonna keep learning and keep practicing and I'm gonna get better and better and better and better. And when you think of it that way, then you're not risking being a failure. You're just going, hey, I got to learn a new skill. It's going to take some time. There's going to be some setbacks, but I'm going to keep applying myself and I'm going to get better. And, within 2 years, I'm going to be as good as most people in this field.
Before we recorded, you mentioned that I made you look up the spotlight effect, and I need to know now that you've got fresh eyes on it because I'm someone that's learned about it for a long time. Do you think we need to start teaching people this from an early age? Because I think it will probably bulldoze down a lot of problems people keep coming back to.
Yeah. Well, so when you said that, to me, what came up was like I'm thinking of my granddaughter, who's was the first grandchild, and everybody's taking her picture, and everybody's like, "Oh, you're so cute." I think that's okay. That's the spotlight effect. That would make so they grow up thinking, and now that we only have one or two kids in the family, when there's 10 kids, you don't get a spotlight. When there's one or two kids, then there's a spotlight, right? So you grow up in the spotlight that you think people do pay attention to you, right? So when you get to be an adult, you go, whoa, is everybody paying attention to me? Because they used to, right? So yes, I do think the spotlight effect is an interesting one because we live with ourselves, so we know what we're thinking, and we know like, hey, like this sweater didn't look so good, but I wore it anyway. And so you're thinking it's not looking good. So then you become hypersensitive to other people and you think they're paying attention to you and that they care. And what we find is that that most people don't really care that much about what other people are doing.
I completely agree, and that is something that is actually the next part that I want to talk about with regret because when I was doing this research to see what people were asking advice on the most in the realm of regret, the most common author of the question reply to someone giving them advice included people will judge me. And that's something that now I'm thinking more and more on. Why are we so like scared of dealing with the regrets or opening up about them, telling someone else, "Oh, I have this regret about something," because we somehow still believe public shaming is this massive thing.
Well, it is a massive thing. So when we lived in bands of 50, hunter gatherers, right? Shaming and ostracizing someone was the worst punishment you could have. And a lot of times it meant death because if you weren't a part of the group, how the heck were you going to feed yourself or protect yourself from a lion, or how are you going to find berries or go, you couldn't kill a woolly mammoth by yourself. So shaming was a big deal. And what we use, and so that gets us into regret, but let's stick with, I mean, that gets us into guilt, but let's stick with regret. So we are a social organism and we're a hierarchical organism, right? We start putting people, above us or below us or whatever. We measure ourselves against everybody. That's innate. That's the way we were designed as human beings. So we tend to be hierarchical and we tend to be group oriented. So when you're in a group, you want the group to like you. And so if you do something wrong or you do something that you think didn't go very well, yeah, the opinions of others make a big difference, and that's from like prehistoric times. So it's just now different because in prehistoric times there's only 50 people in your group that could tell you something didn't go right. Now we have 50 million people because you got computers and internet, so it just is a bigger audience now.